Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
Now, last week on the Manifest telecast, we were overlooking the city of Jerusalem from a different direction. Today, we're in the archaeological park in Jerusalem. Directly to my right is the Western Wall. Directly over my shoulder would be the El Aqsa Mosque. Beyond that is the Dome of the Rock. And what we're going to deal with is part 2 of the Harbingers of Israel. And this one deals with the Gentile link to the restoration of Israel. In Isaiah 66, as the prophet concludes his writing, he says a very powerful statement that we've seen come to pass. It says this: "Who has heard of such a thing, who has seen such a thing, shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children." Now, he says here, a nation being born in a day. When 1948 arrived, and it was May 14th, the British ended their mandate over what they called then Palestine. And David Ben-Gurion announced the reestablishment of the nation of Israel. And it literally happened within a day. There's an interesting word here where it says, "Or shall a nation be born at once?" The Hebrew, when I say once, you think of the number 1. The word once here in Hebrew can be translated as second time. It can read, "Shall a nation bring forth in a day, or the earth bring forth in a day, or a nation shall be born a second time." Why would it say that? Because here's a prophecy from Isaiah chapter 11 that says this: "It'll come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand against the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which is left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Patros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea." Now notice this, he said, "I will recover them a second time." The first dispersion was the Babylonian captivity, when after 70 years the Jews came back from Babylonian captivity to Israel. The second dispersion was by the Romans in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, and you can actually see evidence of this. Our tour group that's with us has, some of them have already seen this, stones that are right at the base of this Western Wall that were toppled in the time of the Roman destruction around 70 AD. But God brought Israel back, and they were reestablished in 1948, so therefore it literally happened what we call the second time. Now, having said that, the Bible teaches us, and the prophets of the Bible taught very clearly, that the Jewish people would live extensively among Gentile nations for an undetermined amount of time. I want to read these verses to you. "The remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, in the midst of many people, like a lion among the beasts of the field, like a young lion among the flock of sheep, who, if he passes through, both treads down and tears in pieces, and none can deliver." That's Micah chapter 5, verse 8. God said this, he said, "I will make your cities desolate, and I will bring the land into desolation." Deuteronomy 28:23, "The heavens over your head will be brass, the land beneath like iron. Rain like dust and dirt. You will have little harvest, and your trees and fruits will be for the locust." Now this is when the land is in desolation. Leviticus chapter 26 and verse 32 says this: "The land will be unproductive. Your enemies dwelling there will be astonished and not be able to survive, it'll be laid waste." And to be laid waste refers to that. Hosea 8 and 8. Can you see that all these scriptures by the prophets that talk about the desolation in the land? Hosea 8 and 8 says this: "Israel is swallowed up. Now they are among the Gentiles, like a vessel in which is no pleasure." Let me give you another one, Luke 21:24. "They shall fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Now, what I want to do for a moment, there's going to be a chart come on the screen. I'm going to read it to the people that are here, because I want you to see just how much the Gentiles dominated the area that is today called Israel. From 303 BC to 63 BC, the Greeks dominated the region. From 63 BC to 313 AD, the Romans dominated the region. From 313 AD to 636 AD, the Byzantines dominated the region. The Byzantines were Christians from the Eastern Empire. 636 to 1099 AD, the Arabs and Muslims dominated the region. From 1099 to 1291, the Crusaders dominated the region. From 1291 to 1516, the Mamluks dominated the region. They were a group out of Egypt. From 1516, actually it starts around 1517 to about 1917, 1918, the Ottoman Turks dominated the region. In fact, the Turks had this area. They had Jerusalem for 400 years. They lost it to the British, and thus in 1917 to 1948, the British dominated the region. And then in 1948, this part of Israel, Jerusalem, the east part became annexed under Israel, under the nation of Israel. And there was a big partition carved out in what was called Palestine to become the nation of Israel. Now, my point is, I want you to notice the number of Gentile nations or empires, groups that literally controlled the city. And Luke said it this way. He said, Jerusalem's going to be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, meaning it comes to a conclusion. Now, let me jump ahead for just a moment and say 1948 is when Israel became a nation. Jerusalem, however, was a divided city. Now, the Mount of Olives, which is over my shoulder to the left, was Arab East Jerusalem, but was actually the country of Jordan. Everything in this direction here was Western Jerusalem, and it was in control. The Christians had part of it, but the Jewish people, this was part of Israel. A 67 war that lasted 6 days changed this whole city. And what happened was, after the war, the Jordanians lost control of the city, the eastern side, and also what's called it's now called the West Bank. And Israel began to annex that in as a part of Israel. So this is the story of how the restoration of Israel took place. And the key date is 1948. And I think everyone here that has ever studied prophecy knows that. Now, there's something interesting. I'm going to show you this. And look, I'm the guy that flunked math, so I have to have one of my secretaries to get a calculator out and say, be sure I've got this right. So if it's not right, blame her. That's where the laugh goes. Let's try it again. Blame her. So, but this is interesting. There have been several writers that wrote books in the 1800s. These books are hard to find because some of them have never been reprinted. S.W. Watson, and I happened to get a hold of this book in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. John Sibling, who was with me, and Rusty Domain, who's here with us on this trip, we were doing a meeting in Kenya, and John had been a student at LSU, and they had a book sale, and this book was in the library, and he bought it for probably $1. One of the greatest prophetic books from the 1800s I've ever read. Professor Watson argued in the book that Jesus could not return till 3 things happened. Number 1, Israel had to be a nation. Now, this is the 1800s. Israel had to be a nation. Number 2, the Jews had to return to Israel. And number 3, Jerusalem had to be the capital. And he based it all on Scripture. And he had letters that he had read from people arguing the point that they didn't believe any of that. They believed that Palestine was no longer even prophetically important. They believed that the church had replaced Israel. And he was saying, no, 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 you've got to take the Scripture literal. And he was one of those writers. There was a man named Blackstone. And he influenced the British in the English in his day in the 1800s about the future significance of Palestine as it related to prophecy. Now remember, it was called Palestine then. And so one of the writers, and I'm going to show you this, and you all have to follow me very carefully, okay? I'm going to show you something. But I'm going to show you a chart here. Reverend W.B. Godby, Doctor of Divinity, in 1896 did a complete commentary on the book of Revelation. He noticed 3 possible calendars that were used in Gentile nations and in the Bible. Now, this is really fabulous because we think there's only one calendar, the one we have today. He said there's a lunar calendar that uses 354 days in a year. It's based on the moon cycle of 29.5 days a month, making a month. He said the second calendar that's found in the Bible is the prophetic calendar that uses 360 days making a year. And if you go to the story of Noah, it will tell you 150 days, how many months it was, and it's months of 360 days making a year. And if you go to the book of Revelation, which is what Dr. Godby pointed out, you'll discover that in the book of Revelation, that the calendar there is 1,260 days for 42 months, and another 1,260 days for 42 months, and that is a lunar calendar. That's the prophetic calendar, that's a 360 day a year, and not the one we use, which is the third one, 365. So he noticed a lunar calendar, 354 days. He noticed a prophetic calendar of God in the Bible, 360 days, making a year. And the third one, of course, is our Gregorian calendar that we have today, which is 365.25 days, making a year. Okay, that's interesting. But then he noticed Leviticus chapter 26 and verse 18, so I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen. And if ye will not yet for all of this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. So he said, wait a minute. God says to Israel that there's a number 7 connected to their punishment. So he says, okay, if the Gentiles have controlled Israel, how does the 7 times punishment come into play? So he did something that's really unusual. He said, I'm going to take the lunar calendar, the prophetic calendar, and the solar calendar. I'm going to take the number of days in a solar year, lunar year, and prophetic year. I'm going to multiply it 7 times and see where it goes. And here's the chart on the screen. The calendar that's the lunar calendar, 354 days making a year multiplied by 7 is 2,478. Then 360 days a year, which is the prophetic calendar, multiplied 7 times is 2,520. Then 365 days making a year multiplied 7 times is 2,555. Now, that's interesting, but then he did something else. And you do have Bible to base this concept on. It's not something a lot of people get into, but you do have Bible. He said he noticed that when God judged Israel in the wilderness, that he said to them, okay, for 40 days you did not believe me, so I'm going to give you 1 year for every day that you disobeyed me. So that's why there were 40 years in the wilderness. So what did God do? God said 1 day is going to represent 1 year, but punishment. Then he noted that in the book of Ezekiel, that Ezekiel is told to lay on his side over 300 days on one side. Look, I couldn't sleep on one side that long, you understand? Then God says for the sins of Judah, you're to lie on the other side for 40 days. But he said it represents the years of their sin. He's lying on his side for 40 days, but it represents 40 years. So we have 2 examples in the Bible where you take a day and you represent a year and a day. Now, this concept is found where it says 1 day with the Lord is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is 1 day, so we know it can be done. So here's what he did, and this is really pretty amazing. He made 2,478 days of the lunar year 2,478 years. He then made the 2,520 days of the prophetic year, 360 days making a year. He made that years instead of days, so it ended up 2,520 years. He took 365, which is actually 365.25 days making a year, totaled it to 2,555 days. He made it, after you multiply it 7 times, 2,555 years. So then he said, I've got to have a starting point where the Gentiles start controlling Jerusalem. Well, he realized the real starting point has to be with the Babylonians. When the Babylonians came to Jerusalem and destroyed it, that began the true Gentile influence over controlling Israel. So the traditional date that he used, and this is a traditional date by early scholars, was 587 BC, the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. So then he said, now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start at that year, and I'm going to add these years. Remember, they were days. He made them years, and see what year comes out. If you take the lunar calendar and start at 587 BC, y'all are with me on this. Everybody's concentrating. It's like, okay. I wouldn't try to write this down because it's a little complicated. If he took the lunar calendar of 587 BC, starting there, and went forward 2,478 years and came to 1891, the year 1891. He took the prophetic calendar from 587 BC, moved it forward 2,520 years, and he came to 1933. He then took the solar calendar from 587 BC, moving forward 2,555 years. Ready for this? He came to 1968. Oh, y'all getting it now. Yeah, see, y'all got that one. The other's like, but you're getting that one. All right. Now, in his calculations, he wrote in 1896. Now, remember, this is 1896. The Muslims conquered Palestine and captured Jerusalem in AD 637, driving Christians out. Daniel says they will hold it 1,260 years. Now, what did he do? Remember in Daniel, it says 1,260 days. He turns it to years. Okay, based on that principle of a day representing a year. So here he goes. He says they'll hold it 1,260 years. Hence you see, according to the prophecies, the Mohammedan or Islamic powers in Palestine will fall in 1897, And when it falls in Palestine, there's no alternative, now watch this, than for the Holy Land to pass into the hands of Christendom. Then he says this on page 66 through 67 of his commentary written in 1896. I'm exceedingly hopeful the Holy Land will pass into, this is wild. I'm exceedingly hopeful the Holy Land will pass into the British Empire. Oh yeah, you're hearing it. This becomes more probable since Baron Rothschild is a son of Abraham, an officer in the British government, the richest man in the world, and has a mortgage on all of that country, meaning Palestine. The moment that Turkdom falls, this is 1896, the moment that Turkdom falls, meaning the Turkish Empire falls, Jerusalem and the Holy Land will pass into the hands of Christians. Then the country, wait a minute, then the country will be turned over to the Jews, its rightful owner. And this notable event will be the sunburst on the Christian world, 1896. Now, you know what happened? Do y'all know the story? He writes this in 1896, and of course, the Islamic Empire did not fall at that time, but in 1917, after World War I, the British came in and took this whole area over from the Turks. Then the British held it from 1917 to 1948, and just like Goodby said, handed it over to the Jewish people. Now, I'm going to make a point that's going to surprise some of you. The reason that some of these prophetic events happened was men like Goodby, and he wasn't the only one. There was a preacher named Blackstone. There was a day, now I'm about to preach right here. There was a day in the world, especially in the United States and Britain and England, when preachers who were deep in the Word influenced the political leaders. And the political leaders would listen to the preachers. Now this is years ago. But here's what you have to understand. The British and the English in that day, in the 1800s, was a very strong Christian nation. And they allowed these prophetic preachers to take their books into the Parliament. Y'all listening? And they would read the prophecies before these Christian men, and these Christian men would say, wait a minute, we're a part of prophecy. And it's not that they forced it to happen, because you really can't force a prophecy to happen. But when the war took place of 1917, it opened the door for the British to move into this area. And then later, it opened a door for them to just leave, because the British Empire started collapsing and they didn't have the money to keep it up. It opened up the door of opportunity for them to leave and pull out of Palestine and annex a place for the Jewish people to live. And that's why that the older Muslims, many times, that lived in this area, which was called Palestine, say, and this is their quote, and I've heard them say it in books and writings that were written, it was Christians who helped form Israel. And really, it was God who did it, but God has to use people. And it's interesting to note that these prophecies, what happened? Well, let's go back to Godby's statements. Okay, he talked about the late 1800s. In 1897, something big was going to happen. What happened? You ready? It was the big initiation of the Zionist movement that helped organize Israel. In fact, the Zionists said in 1898, they said in 50 years there'll be a nation of Israel, and exactly 50 years later there was in 1948. Okay? Number two, in 1917, that was one of the dates that he had looked at. The Turkish rule fell. The British took Palestine from the hands of the Turks. And he also calculated in his book of Revelation, now this is amazing, I'm telling you it's amazing, using these numbers, he said 1933 will introduce the time of the end. Now I don't know if y'all know what happened in Germany in 1933. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. And that brought about the Holocaust, which later brought about the rebirth of the nation of Israel, because the Jews were friendly and had compassion toward, the world was friendly toward the Jews that had died in the Holocaust. Then he said 1988 will be the second end time frame. And 1967 is when this city was reunited as the capital of Israel. I hope somebody's following me right here. Now, so why am I telling you that? Because there is a scripture in the book of Acts that Peter stood up and he's preaching, and he said, the heavens must receive Christ until the restitution of all things, spoken of by the mouth of all the holy prophets since the world began. When Peter used the phrase restitution, it actually can mean a restoration. In fact, I think it's W.E. Vine's commentary takes that Greek word restoration, and I know just a little bit of Greek, but I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word because Dr. Arrington would correct me. He's a Greek professor after it's over with. But in that Greek word, which is very rare, found that one place in the Bible, it means to balance accounts, to repair a bone that's broken, to repair a road where there's a hole in it, and it also means, ready for this, to restore land back to its rightful owner. So when Jesus said there's a restitution of all things, he's not talking about the road, the bone, or the balancing accounts. He's talking about a country being returned back to its original owner. So the restitution of all things starts in 1948, continues in 1967 with the reunification of Jerusalem, then continues with the Jews returning back to the land. So here's what we're going to do. There's more I could say in this. In fact, normally in my notes, I never finish the outline. There's a whole, see right there, there's a whole section left. And don't write me to get the outline because you're not going to get it, okay? Because there's no way I can send an outline to everybody. And you wouldn't understand my notes anyway. But I'm going to probably continue a part 3 of the Harbingers of Israel. And I may do a study next week, hopefully next week, on 10 major events and how they fit into prophecy that have happened in our generation. And this is how we know the Lord's going to come back. There are people who believe Israel doesn't have a right to exist. There are people who believe Jerusalem should not be the capital of Israel. But friend, let me just remind you of something. The Messiah will rule from Israel. The Messiah's throne will be in Jerusalem, and it will be a city of all nations and all people. And now you see people, while we've been taping, people from all over the world have walked by touring the city, and they continue to do so from Singapore, Thailand, from Indonesia, from Russia, even from China, from the United States, Canada, South America, Africa. And this is a city for all nations. And God is getting it ready for the time of the end and the last days. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be introducing something very, very special, which is brand new. And I want you to get this. I'll be telling you about it, and it's something that I think is going to be one of the greatest resource tools we've ever done in the 40-year history of our ministry. I will be back in just a moment.
Perry Stone is pleased to offer his newest landmark prophetic book for 2017, The Revelation Generation. This book has new research and special prophetic insight not found in any previous book or teaching from Perry. The new research includes the prophecies of the patriarchs, including Adam, Enoch, Jacob, Moses, and David, that reveal last-day events in the Hebrew Scriptures. Perry explores the amazing end-time prophecies in Jewish writings, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Damascus document, and the 1st century BC Gabriel stone, recently discovered at the Dead Sea, which Perry personally saw while in Israel. Perry explains biblically based rabbinical prophecies and how Christ could not have returned before 1948, as Christ's return is linked to Israel's complete restoration. He warns about an impending shaking coming to America based upon the 6 woes in Isaiah which will occur in our nation. Perry has researched 14 harbingers occurring in Israel, all pointing to Christ's return. He includes a chapter on prophecies concealed within the Jewish calendar, including a study in the Jewish month of Iyar. In the chapter titled Biblical Numbers in the Hebrew Alphabet Reveal Election Codes, using the Torah reading that occurred in the synagogues before, during, and after Donald Trump's inauguration, Perry will reveal the possible future patterns of the Trump presidency, as Perry used this same method to reveal the actions and activities occurring under Presidents Bush and Obama. Perry explains how this method works only during major prophetic seasons. The book concludes with the chapter, The Battle Over the Temple Mountain. This new book is part of package offer RG123. Perry is also including on audio CD his 2 most recent prophetic updates, America's Leaders and God's Providence, and the CD, Wicked Spirits Controlling High Places. He will show you the 2 prophetic reasons for America's leadership being changed and the spirits assigned to bring down America. Order this new offer by calling toll-free 1-888 1-888-212-7323 That's 1-888-212-7323 or online at perrystone.org. You may also write us and enclose your donation of $30 or more to Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. Request offer number RG123 when calling or writing. This offer is available for a limited time, so contact us today. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, no matter how you feel about the election, whether you think it's great or you think it's horrible, I hope that you will read my prophetic book to get insight from the prophetic realm about why things went the way they did. That is available now, so take the time to order it. Real quick, let me tell you where we're going to be coming to. This is exciting. We're coming to Logan, West Virginia, to the Logan High School, the Willie Acres Arena, June the 9th, that's Friday, through Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We're going to have a Friday service, 2 services on Saturday at 10 and 6, and a Sunday afternoon service at 2. Everyone is invited. You don't need a ticket to get in. You don't need anything except your body to get in and show up there, okay? Real quick, Church at Liberty Square, Wednesday night, June 7th, Cartersville, Georgia, Release the Roar in New Albany, Ohio, Friday through Sunday, June the 23rd through the 25th, and Summer Warrior Fest. Young people, we're having a Summer Warrior Fest, so get registered for Summer Warrior Fest in July. Well, go to perrystone.org for more information about places we're going to be coming to. I mentioned to you last week, and I kind of ran out of time, we are hearing reports of the most stunning moves of God that you could ever imagine. Miracles, healings, deliverances, Jesus appearing to people in their hospital rooms, appearing to people of different religions in their homes. Ladies and gentlemen, God is on the move, and we are fortunate to be alive today. We've had thousands of people come to Tennessee recently for conferences at the Omega Center International. And I've noticed something also. I've noticed that when I've been studying about the cities in America in certain states, a lot of people are moving from different areas more into the rural area, more into the country area, the mountain areas. And, you know, that actually is prophetic that was going to happen at the time of the end. And I really pray for people, because I know there are people that live in some very rough areas, and you have to raise children in rough areas. We pray for God to protect you and your family and your children, because a lot of people can't transition from one area to another. So we ask God to send the angels of the Lord to protect your children, your home, and when they go to school, when they come home, and that God will be with you and bless you and keep you. Isn't it wonderful to think about one day we're all going to be in the presence of God in heaven and not have to worry about all the junk that's going on down here on earth? We love you, and thank you for watching Manifest. I got a great program next week.
Perry Stone invites you to join him for his 2017 Israel Tour. The dates are November 20th through the 29th with an optional visit to Petra in the country of Jordan. Call 1-888-321-3629 or visit perrystone.org for more information and how to register. Seating is limited, so call today.
Perry Stone invites you to join him April